Herzlich willkommen zu einer kleinen Bonus-Episode von Unter die Sekunde. Als Highlight unserer kleinen Serie von Kollaborationen haben wir uns mit dem Off-the-Track-Cast zusammengetan, um eine gemeinsame Episode aufzunehmen.
Im Dialog mit den Hosts besprechen wir die internationalen Unterschiede bei erfolgenden Schools. Viel Spaß mit diesem kleinen Zusammenschnitt der Highlights aus unserer ersten englischsprachigen Episode.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Off the Track. Today we are doing a special collaboration episode with another podcast, the team Sonic Boom, who are from Germany and run a German language podcast about F1 in schools as well. And so welcome, Sonic Boom. Today the special guests joining us from Sonic Boom are Ardi.
How's it going?
Anas.
Hello.
Florian.
Hi there.
And Jacob.
Hello.
And we've got members of the Off the Track team, George.
Hi.
Jesse.
Yo.
And I'll be your host today, Michael. When it comes to your presentation, your engineering interviews, and your pit display interviews, what are they like?
That's an important thing to mention because we in Germany don't have engineering interviews. So you just submit a 20-side portfolio where you write about engineering and marketing and that stuff, but you don't really have an engineering judging. So some judges try to make that up by asking questions afterwards, after the presentation, but we only have a interview for the pit display and the presentation.
Right.
And the verbal presentation is just about 8 minutes long, so you really have to be strict on your timing on that.
And it is also that the judges, the questions that the judges ask after the presentation, they can't give you points for that. So it's
personal interest.
My question on that is so in the verbal presentation content for most countries, a lot of it's based on like innovation and collaboration. Do they talk about engineering? Is there like a focus on engineering during the verbal presentation, like marked criteria against it? Or is it more still based on like the kind of worlds-ish kind of verbal presentation?
I think there's no focus at all, actually. It's just trying to put like everything you've done into these 8 minutes, portraying it as effectively as possible. You mentioned innovation; that's a big part of it, actually, because like every team will say exactly the same thing at some point, and if you add things you have innovated on, it kind of leaves a mark with the judges. We have noticed, but it's just not really anything
that important. Yes, but when it comes to the engineering interview, in Germany we just hand out in our cars for evaluation on Friday evening, and a jury will evaluate the CAD data in the cars overnight.
So George, this is a question that we probably want to ask. Like, what is it friendly or competitive in the kind of UK scene as well? Like, are teams willing to be a bit sharey, a bit talk about their stuff, or is it more treated seriously? Like, you're not here to be my friend, you're here to be my competitor.
I'd say it's a mix. I'd say everyone's generally friendly and courteous to each other. I don't think teams are quite keen to keep their work private, I think, until the competition. They won't go around sharing everything and saying what they're doing, which I think is just sort of a competitive element. But in terms of how everyone's still friendly to each other. It's not like you don't get everyone sort of sniping at each other, and just generally don't get teams reporting other teams for like small discrepancies they may see that they've broken or something like that. I'd say it's a good atmosphere.
Is there a thing about reporting? Because I've never had a final where a team has reported.
Well, there's this infamous document in Australia known as the grievance form.
Grievance form in Australia is pretty much used by almost every team for any small niggle. So to give you a bit of backstory, the Australian competition is quite toxic between the teams that want to win. I don't know if I'm just speaking for myself, but we did not want to be friends with anyone there. The only reasons we would interact with teams was to get information out of them before the comp. And at the comp, we were not there to be their friends. We were just there to get information to see how we could do better and what their weaknesses were, so we could really pick apart those. I'm not sure if we were all, it was just our team, but I think that's a consensus shared by at least a few other teams that I've been in and around. If Michael wants to expand on his thoughts on that.
I mean, I wasn't a very callous child, so I didn't feel that way. But I can see that being the attitude of some other teams towards us, especially the other team at Nationals from our school. But it can sometimes get a bit intense in the Australian competitions. Do you see some things like that, George? Do you have grievance forms in the UK, George?
I don't think we have. I don't think we have a set method if you want to report another team. It doesn't happen too often.
There are certain countries, well, not certain countries. There are some. You are always going to come across teams at a world level that just purely want to win no matter what, and sometimes that they will go to every length possible to make sure that they find every little bit about you, and they're not there to be your friends. But at the Worlds, it's that most of the time you'll find that the chemistry is quite good between teams that are not from your own country.
But does it pay off to try hard like that?
For us, we didn't really have any communication with any of the teams in Australia that were going with us, because neither of them really wanted to communicate more than, well, we didn't really want to communicate either. But and I think it kind of worked out well that way. Like, we weren't obsessed over what Zero or Fast Pace were doing. And I think when you start obsessing over what teams are doing and start looking at other teams, you start to lose sight of what's good for your own team. Because the challenge isn't just a one size fits all, everyone has to do the same thing. One of the ways you can really get caught down this rabbit hole is with sponsorship posts and seeing how many sponsors a team has. You don't know their sponsorship methods or how much money they're getting from those sponsors, and it can be terribly misleading and make you feel very bad if you see a lot of sponsors that shouldn't be there or are very minimal contributors all the time. You can end up losing a lot of sleep over it. So yeah,
Is that getting so toxic in Australia? Because I never thought about, oh, that team has 5 sponsors, we have 22.
No, I did actually.
we're not talking necessarily a toxic thing. It's more so like, it's bad for your team's state if you're worrying about worrying about other teams from especially your own country.
It's an opportunity cost as well. Having to think, investing the mental energy to think about what this other team's doing, or investing that mental energy in actually producing something that's valuable for your team, working on improving your car, working on making some more graphics, improving your website, whatever it is. You really just need to consider whether fretting over these other teams, which is generally an unproductive thing to do, is the best thing for you. Benchmarking against other teams is by no means a terrible thing, but you need to do it with a couple of tons of salt, because you don't have the inside view into their team. You don't know what's going on, like Jesse said. So you really need to, just look at it all with a grain of salt and pay more attention to your own work than the work of others. Does everyone agree with that? So, based on what Artie said about the German competition being a bit enterprise heavy, I may have a bit of a biased perspective on this, but I think the Australian competition has an enterprise lean to it as well. Would I be correct in that assumption, or is that just my view because I've been a graphics designer for so long?
I would say that it's actually quite an even split in the competition, because I was breaking down the rules with a team that I'm mentoring a few weeks ago. I think it's actually 500-500.
Right.
So it's actually really evenly split. The difference is that the marketing, so say the marketing portfolio and the marketing interview and the trade display and the verbal presentation are all deemed as marketing activities. So there's more marketing activities to do than engineering activities. However, the actual split of points isn't too bad. Whereas, like, say there's only the engineering interview, the engineering portfolio and the racing versus all the other enterprise stuff.
So, how's the world split between engineering and enterprise?
I think it's 50-50 as well, is it?
Is it, George?
Oh, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's roughly close to that. I mean, because the racing is a quarter of the marks.
Right, yeah.
Wenn euch dieser kleine Zusammenschnitt gefallen hat, hört euch auf jeden Fall die ganze Episode bei Off the Track an.
Folgt uns gerne auf Instagram und auf YouTube, um zukünftige Episoden nicht zu verpassen.
Tschüss!